Hi everyone, this is Sally McKenzie, and I'm the CEO of McKenzie Management. We're a nationwide dental practice management company that helps dental practices reach their true potential. And I've been doing that for about 37 years now. So I want to thank you for making time in your schedule to be with me today. I really do appreciate it, as I know how busy everybody is. And I also want to have a special thanks to Viva Learning for getting this webinar to you live this evening. Please be sure and visit their website at vivalearning.com because they have way over 600 on-demand courses for dentists, hygienists, assistants, and business staff. So you can certainly get all of your continuing education there. And I also want to invite you to go to where you're registered this evening at my site, practicemanagementlearning.com. And there you'll find all of my archived on-demand courses for your self-study. And I think I have around 30 or so on there now, so on a lot of different subjects. So it's really helpful to especially for somebody new in dentistry, to certainly go there and look at all of those and increase your education about practice management in dentistry. But today's webinar is titled 8 Steps to Solid Fees. And what I'm going to do is to help you focus, and I want you to take a very objective look at your fees. Because when you set your fees, it's a personal decision, but it's one that directly can impact your practice's success. Because if you set them too high, then you run the risk of losing patients from making your practice their dental home. But if if your fees are too low, then your practice will never be able to reach its full potential. Because bills then are hard to pay, and raises can't be given, and so on and so forth. So your fee schedule is the most important tool that you have for generating income, and that is to help offset the costs of doing business as a dental practice. Tom Lamole is a good friend of mine, and he's a noted expert on proper coding for dental insurance. And he also helps dental offices in establishing their fee schedules. And Tom wrote for my New Dentist magazine, so I also am the publisher and owner of the New Dentist magazine that goes out to dentists in the first 10 years out of dental school nationwide on a quarterly basis. And in there, he stated that dentists should have only one fee schedule that lists the usual fee for each procedure that the dentist performs. And he also brought to light that a lot of state dental boards and other regulatory authorities frown on doctors that have multiple fee schedules. And we see this quite frequently as consultants, when we go into a practice, we'll see that they have multiple fee schedules in their computer, such as one for an insured patient and one, let's say, for a non-insured patient. So in other words, your usual fee is the fee that appears on your fee schedule. And the usual fee is that amount of money that dentists charge in the open, free market economy. So it represents your full fee, and it has nothing to do with that amount of money contractually reimbursed by a patient's benefit plan, for example. It's simply your baseline standard. Now, customary fees are those established by insurance benefit plan administrators, customary fees, based on data they gathered from insurance claims. But you need to put in what your usual fee is. The key here is that it's imperative that practices make every effort to help patients feel that they're getting value for the dental fees that they pay. And in setting a fee schedule, you want to make sure that you don't trap yourself by attempting to create a fee schedule based on what some third-party payer reimburses you at excuse me, at 65% of the 85 percentile. So you want to have what your usual fee is, not necessarily what is customary by a third-party person. It's also very important to know where you stand with other dentists in your demographic area. So often dentists establish their fees without checking this information, what other dentists in their area are charging. And does that sound familiar? Because many are like that. And then you need to find out how your fees compare to other practices in your community. And so if yours are significantly lower or higher, then you're going to want to make adjustments. I mean, if you're not getting new patients into your practice, perhaps your fees are too high. Perhaps the people in the community are out there talking about how high your fees are. Beyond researching other dental offices in your area, I would suggest contacting your Chamber of Commerce to collect information on your area's demographics and income level of your zip code and zip codes surrounding your area, because these are two important factors that you should consider when establishing or adjusting your fees. And you can also find out more information on dental fees online or through your local dental society. Just remember, excuse me, that fees not only need to be in line with the community you're serving, they should also reflect your practice and the level of service you provide. Many doctors will arbitrarily establish their fees without ever checking what their dental neighbors are doing. So study dental fees in your area and find out where you stand in comparison. Information on dental fees are available online, and there, like I said, there are also surveys and reports regarding costs associated with running a dental business, and they're available through the American Dental Association. So survey data from a nationwide random sample of dentists who were asked to record fees most often charged for different dental procedures are collected and published in the ADA's Survey of Dental Fees report. This report provides information on what dentists who completed the survey typically charge, but these are not recommended fees from the ADA or an ADA standard for fees, because they're not allowed to do that, and so therefore they don't. So consider the message that your fees send to your current patients and prospective patients. And if your fees are the lowest in the area, are you attracting quality patients that appreciate and value your care? Or is your practice a magnet for price shoppers? Similarly, if your fees are the highest, do you want to be known as the most expensive dentist in town? And always remember, if that's okay with you, then it's okay. You're the one that has to have a good night's sleep at night, and you're the one that has to live with whether or not people are going to be able to come into you or not. Do you offer a patient experience and results that warrant a higher rate like that? Are you seeking to work with a smaller patient base? Because we have seen that patient retention in those particular practices where we will see the fees higher than what the demographics really stands for, just they don't have the patient base they want. So they're usually crying about not having enough new patients. Step 2, what does it cost you to deliver the dentistry? So in an ideal world, your fees, you should base your fees on your overhead expenses, your patient base, the demographics and the socioeconomics of the people in your area, your level of professional expertise, of course, and how much debt that you have. It is very critical. And, so But what I want to say is it's a fine line between you having incurred more debt than the fees can be raised to pay for it. For example, let's say you have a hygienist being paid $55 an hour, and she thinks she's entitled to a raise every year. Now she wants $60 an hour. But you know, if you raise the fees on Aprophia and Bite Wings so that $60 an hour is 1/3 of what that production is, then that's going to put your fees more than the 85th percentile in your demographics, then perhaps you can't do it. So I also want to caution you against setting and having fees that are too low for some services and then too high for others, because you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot by having intentionally low fees and then trying to make it up with high fees for other procedures. And in our consulting with a dentist about fees, we've witnessed dentists who would keep hygiene fees, for example, unrealistically low and then try to make it up with higher fees in other procedures such as crown. And we've seen firsthand in this, in this most recent past economy that we went through, that fees simply could not continue to rise there for several years. However, if you accept insurance and you want to set your fee for a crown at $1,000, for example, and let's say insurance pays you only $800, you cannot look at that as $200 loss. You have to really look at the reality that you just don't have a patient in the chair that's willing to pay you $1,000, for the fees. So as I'm going to talk about here in a little bit, personality and ego has a lot to do with where the fees are in many dental practices. Step 3, track your overhead. Know what the industry benchmarks are. So in order to focus on reducing your debt, you have to know where you compare with industry standards. There's industry standards and then there's industry ideals. And I invite you to view one of my past webinars on practicemanagementlearning.com. I've done one on overhead. Or if you want to send me an email when we're finished today, I have a free report that I'm happy to send to you on overhead expenses. You just send me an email and I'll send it off to you. But to refresh your memory, overhead is the total amount you spend on items to run your dental practice divided by the amount of money that you deposit in the bank. So, in other words, expenses divided by deposits, what you collect, what your revenues are. Those are all the same term. Your laboratory should not be any more than 10% of your monthly deposits. If it's more than that, then you need to, if any of these I'm going through are more, you've got to analyze, investigate, or, you've got to solicit my help, for example, to figure out why and how can it be reduced. Your facility should not be any more than 5% of your monthly collections. If you own the facility, you certainly can have it as much as you want it to be. But if you're renting your facility, let's try to keep it in the 5% or less range. Payroll should be no more than 22% of your monthly deposits, and that includes all employees but does not include the dentist owner who owns the practice. Even if you're incorporated, I understand you're an employee technically for tax reasons of the corporation, but you need to subtract yourself out of that. So it should be no more than 22%. If yours is more than that, and that's almost always a culprit of where it is with high overhead, then you have to find out why. Am I paying too much? Do I have too many employees? Am I paying hygienists a guaranteed amount, whether they have a patient or they don't have a patient, and their schedule is filled with cancellations? You have to figure out why. Payroll taxes and any benefits paid to employees, not the owner, should be no more than 3 to 5% of the revenue. So that would be matching Social Security, workers' comp, federal unemployment, and any benefits that you might provide for the employees, no more than 3 to 5%. Dental supplies should not be higher than 5% of your monthly collections, and miscellaneous expenses are anything else that you are paying out of the checkbook that does not fall into what I've already mentioned, that should be no more than 10% of the monthly deposits. That makes up all of the rest of the miscellaneous. And dentists have a tendency to put things like the accountant as a main expense, and an attorney as a main expense, postage as a main expense. Those are all miscellaneous expenses, all miscellaneous. Add all those things up, and they can't be any more than 10 cents out of every dollar that you collect. So if your expenses are running more than these percentages that I've shared, then you need help to find out why, and a business plan to get it reduced, because that financial debt is just going to, one of the ways you think of getting out of it is, well, I'll just increase the fees. Step 4 is you've got to establish production goals, and you've got to set goals based on the number of days and hours per week that you're going to see patients. So let's say that you're not meeting your financial goals. You absolutely have to stay focused on what your practice vision is and your goals, and think about what it is that you want from your career and what you want out of your lifestyle that you'd like to lead. And then you have to determine how much revenue the practice needs to bring in to make those goals a reality. And this then in turn allows you to establish fees that will help you meet your personal and professional goals. But as I stated before, you've got to remember that you have to create value for these patients. You have to have a pleasant environment. You can't have one that doesn't show current technology, because these patients know what that technology is now. They don't want to, believe it or not, we still go into practices where they have not updated paint or wall hangings, or there's rips in chairs, and just a facility that reeks of not putting any money you've made back into the facility. I mean, who wants to go to someplace like that? So provide the best care possible and let the patients know that you're doing that. And you got to have a level of dentistry that achieves the greatest return for your patients. And when patients understand the value of the services you provide, they're going to be much less likely to balk at fee increases. Because I don't think you can talk to anybody on the street who doesn't think that going to the dentist is expensive. We just hear this all the time. So for purposes of, an example here, let's say that your goal is to break $900,000 for practice production, including hygiene. And your hygiene department is on track and producing 1/3 of that practice production. So therefore, you have the difference as a dentist, and your production goal is like $603,000 then. And that calculates at just over $12,563 a week, considering you're taking 4 weeks a year for vacation, and you're working 40 hours a week, and this means that you'll need to produce $314 an hour. And if you want to work fewer hours, then your per hour production will need to be higher. But you have to know what your goal is, and you've got to establish a production goal in order to know what the fees have to be, in order to know how long the procedures are going to take to what your fees are going to be. Step 5, you need to plan for increases. And I would suggest I mean, it's been suggested for years to adjust your fees yearly or twice a year at a smaller percentage. However, that common type of a recommendation absolutely got thrown out of the window when the Great Recession, hit. Fees were not increased. Some offices had to lower fees, and we kind of kept fees, where they were. I am not suggesting that you do this without the consideration of having your fees analyzed demographically and also looking at your debt and your overhead. But let's just say that you can't remember the last time you raised your fees. And it's very common for us when we ask the dentist when the fees were last increased. It's very common to, hear 2 years or 3 years. And of course, there was a period of time in there when the recession was going on that was common. But if it's been years since you've made a fee increase, or if you have no system in place for making, rate adjustments, now's the time to make sure you're not undercharging. And this is important because if you're undercharging, it's costing your practice big. So think about this. Undercharging patients by as little as, let's say, 7 to 8% costs you thousands of dollars in lost revenue every year. And undercharging by 40 to 50% is going to translate into serious financial problems for that practice. So you have to base fee adjustments on logic and not on a fear of losing patients or because you feel guilty about raising your fees. So I'm suggesting that you establish a solid fee for each service and then adjusting or reanalyzing them at least twice a year. So for example, the first increase could be 2%, followed by 3% for an annual yearly increase of 5%. But that recommendation right there is not going to hold true for every single person. I mean, it's not a black and white thing. And while 5% might not seem a lot, but even if you're only raising fees $4 to $5 per procedure, you're going to notice a significant difference in your bottom line. And in most cases, I recommend that fees be adjusted each year. But if you've chosen to maintain your current fee schedule for the past couple of years, I hope that you've at least mentioned this to your patients. They need to know that your fees have not increased. They can't possibly appreciate what you did for them if you don't inform them. And with that being said, it's probable that for some dentists, and if not many, it's time to adjust fees, to at least analyze your fees. And like other businesses, costs are increasing on many fronts. I guarantee you that your rent is being adjusted on that facility every year. But before you make that decision to raise them, I want you to take time to consider a few factors first. So you've got to have some type of a fee system. And I want you to think about using logic and not, fear as your guide. So, if you have not increased your fees in year, and then again, long before the recession hit, many dentists don't have any kind of system for doing so, and consequently, the practice finances are suffering. So the dentist, down the street may be charging in the 90th percentile and might be thriving, but many doctors can convince themselves that they simply, couldn't charge that because the patients will leave. And that's not what we don't want to be driven out of fear about it. Yet ours is a culture in which people associate quality with cost. In other words, you get what you pay for. And like it or not, cheap is often equated with low quality. As compassionate as you may be as a healthcare provider, providing the best care comes at a price. So fee adjustments are definitely a necessary part of running a high-quality dental practice. So but you have to ask yourself, are you compromising quality for low fees? So establish a solid fee schedule for each service, and when your second cousin Sue asks if you're giving family discounts, tell her that she'll have to take that up with your collections coordinator. So I recommend that you try to leave price breaks, to the Black Friday jockeys and the big box retailers, because you've got a practice you have to run. And we've seen many dentists do not really have no idea how many adjustments that they're actually giving to patients. So that's very important that you are getting a monthly and a year-to-date idea on the discounts that you're providing for your fees. Because we can look at a production by provider report that shows how many crowns were done, how many root canals were done, how many class 2 fillings were done, so on and so forth. And we know what the fees are in that practice. And then we look at how many class 2 posterior fillings were done and what the fees that were charged and the average then of that fee. And that fee from that calculation is a lot less than what the usual fee is. So I understand that with the insurance, and you have to look at that, too, as well. But if it is a huge difference, you want to find out, why is that happening? Am I giving too many, discounts to friends and friends of friends and friends of those friends? So step 7, how much is enough? How much does the practice need to produce to meet your financial needs and wants? How much do you need and want to pay for your staff and yourself? And what are the mortgage and the utility bills at home? So when you are setting these practice objectives and goals and production goals and scheduling goals, it's always best to derive at the calculation starting from what you have to have. So step 1 is, what does the practice need to keep the doors open and plan for the future? So that is having you add up all the expenses as you know them, from electricity to the rent to the lab to the dental supplies to payroll with anticipated increases, having technology budget in there. So in addition to that total, then you have to add in what you want or need to take home. And of course, those are two different things. I want this much, and I need this much. So maybe you figure out two different totals, wanting and what you really need. So you have to have a pretty good idea on your personal expenses then as well. So let's say that you need to take home $175,000 a year, and the expenses at the practice are running $325,000. Well, that's a total of $500,000. And of course, you need to save for emergencies, and you got taxes and retirement. But you start somewhere with a total of the practice and personal, and that's the total amount of revenues that practice has to generate. And of course, no practice collects at 100%. So if you're collecting, for example, at the industry ideal at 98% of production, then that total you come up with has to be divided by 0.98. So your production would have to be $510,204 in that particular example. So it's never, 100% of whatever, because we offices don't collect at 100%. Okay, step 8 renew your production per hour goals. I want you to you have to look at this. So if a crown was charged out at $950, and it takes 2 appointments for a total of 90 minutes, then you're producing $10.56 a minute. Times 60 minutes, you're producing $633 an hour when you're doing a crown. And let me suggest that you do this production per hour math calculation on every single procedure you do. So to determine the rate of hourly production and see if the practice is being able to meet its objectives, the assistant needs to log the amount of time it takes to perform each procedure that the practice does. And if that procedure takes the doctor 3 appointments, she should record the time needed for all 3 appointments. And then the fee for that procedure is then divided by the total time to do the procedures. So you come up with how much you're producing per minute per hour. Calculate or compare that hourly amount then to what you've set as your goal. And it obviously must equal or exceed the identified goal. Now, it might do that for crowns, but it might not be doing that for a class 1 filling, for example. So if you're not meeting your production per hour goal, you have 2 choices. Reduce the time you take to perform the procedure and or increase the fee. So in this example I've got here, if that prep could be reduced to 50 minutes from 60, the total time for both appointments then would be 80 minutes instead of 90. And if you raise the fee from $950 for that crown to $1,000, your production per hour goes to $750 an hour from $633 an hour. So I encourage you to do this analysis to find out whether or not you can actually produce per hour what it is that you have to have out of that business to pay for that business overhead and pay for what you have to have personally. And because sometimes, there's a lot of different things. We see dentists who, they've been taking the same amount of time to do a crown prep since they got out of dental school. And it's like, seriously, do you think that you could challenge yourself to drop it 10 minutes? Just 10 minutes. Even you drop it 5 minutes, But it's just like we get into that routine. We just keep doing the same old. But you see your production, per hour increase. Do your fees reflect your personality? High fees can reflect arrogance, narcissistic behavior. Low fees can reflect where your self-esteem is. Because many times dental practice fees, they absolutely will reflect the personality type of the dentist. Extroverted dentists tend to have higher fees than introverted dentists. And those doctors whose temperament type is very feeling versus more analytical, they will adjust their fees, and they often have a range of fees for a specific procedure. So if you have a fear of rejection, patients rejecting your treatment plans, and patients will say no to your services, then you're going to tend to have lower fees than the dentist across the street. And it's true that the more financial debt that you have and the more that it grows, so does your emotional debt. There is such a thing as emotional debt. And if you fail to manage your financial debt, then you can, for example, you develop a bad credit rating. And if you fail to manage your emotional debt, you stress out, you burn out, you get divorces, just all kinds of things. But simply raising your fees doesn't solve the issue. It is a psychological fact that emotion will always overcome reason. And for that reason, understanding which emotions are guiding you or driving you is important, because fear will always trump logic. So there's a whole big realm of that, because we are the owners of our business. We're the CEOs. We're the one that set the fees, and we see a lot of direct correlation to that, where the fees are in relation to the personality type and how much emotional debt that this dentist is carrying around. So you've got a lot of frustration. You can't pay the bills. So dentist's idea of getting out of that hole is, I'll just raise my fees. So it sounds like a simple solution, but there's a point of no return, especially when you get to the point of where your fees are the highest in your geographic area. And some of you will just have your head buried in the sand and refuse to even look or, to analyze demographically in your area where you stand fee. So therefore you don't know. The way we say is ignorance is bliss. But, patients talk, and now more than ever, with the social media, that makes it worse. Sometimes we can directly see where there has been a decline in the patient retention and a decline in the number of new patients directly correlated with what happened to the fees in that time frame. So having your fees analyzed for your demographic area is critical, as well as certainly I've discussed keeping your overhead down. So you are not feeling that financial pressure of the debt. That will raise your blood pressure. That is so stressful, is to have all of that debt. The idea is to try not to get yourself into that. And certainly if you're going to take on a loan, you're going to take on a lease, you're going to take on more debt, you have to have a business plan. You got to have a game plan. How am I going to increase my business in order to justify, the expense? We go back to building a new facility, building a Taj Mahal in your honor. Build it and they will come. Well, it doesn't work like that. You are just riddled and just got that huge debt monkey on your back, and your emotional debt is just through the roof. Now, it's very important that your employees are supporting your fees. How many times, I've heard a lot of times employees say, I think the fees are too high. I couldn't get my dentistry done here. That's a killer comment for a practice. And most practice owners don't even know their staff feel this way, unfortunately. That's one of the questions that we ask in our consulting work is, and some employees will say they don't know what the fees are. It's very common for primarily hygienists to say, I don't know what the fees are. But we ask them, do you feel that the fees are, too low, too high, just right, or, have patients said anything to you about the fees? It's really good to get that kind of a team survey done. So be sure that your team definitely buys into your fees and they buy into fee increases, because a team member that thinks you're charging too much can undermine your practice and cause a lot of far-reaching problems. So the team members need to understand the process and enthusiastically support the fee increases. And they also have to believe in the quality of dentistry being provided. They have to believe in you. They have to know that you care about people's well-being and you're not all about, money, because they see it. They see it, they hear it, they know it. The most expensive car out there, the dentist has 2 or 3 homes and multiples of stuff, just stuff. So there's practices where that never even enters into the thought process of a team member. But you can go into other practices where the employees aren't feeling the love. They're not, it could be a situation where patients are coming back for redos. Then they start to question that. Many times the dentist has never done any dentistry on that particular employee. And that also, I think that's very helpful. I mean, if you can give an employee, a smile that they don't have right now, they see the quality of your work, and then they like you. They flat out like you as a person. So that's important. And then they'll be supportive of your fees. And we've been into offices where the front office person is like telling the patient the treatment plan and what the fees, and she's, well, I know what you mean. She's like, I couldn't afford to come here either. I mean, poor dentist doesn't know that's happening, unfortunately, but we're able to see it in patient retention figures again, and the decline of the actual patient base. Let's talk about overcoming fee objections. When patients are, sometimes patients are just so bold, they'll just come right out and say, well, that's just really too high, I can't, afford that. So while it's important to take a deep breath when you're making eye contact with a patient, and just being silent for a few seconds when you talk about, let's say, talk about fees. Not that I'm necessarily recommending that the dentist talk about fees, because I really don't recommend that as a general rule of thumb across the board. I mean, there's always exceptions to the rule. But many of the dentists, it just takes up too much of your time. You don't have time for that. I want you to keep producing. And that's what you have treatment coordinators for. And you have trained, office manager, front office, financial coordinators to talk about the fee. But those few moments of silence, might seem like a lifetime, but they're very crucial. And many patients will answer. Oftentimes they answer their own objectives, or at least they give you information that you need, such as their friend went to Dr. X and was charged this amount, or my husband just lost his job, or we've had unusual medical expenses. So in this way, you can determine then, if patient financing, like care credit, for example, may be the answer, or perhaps an alternative to the treatment plan. Perhaps there is an alternative treatment plan that could be done, or one to a temporary treatment plan, for example, just to get them out of any type of immediate situation they have. But the key is to acknowledge what the patient is saying and then proceed to address their concerns, and certainly to assure them that the dental treatment recommended is worth the investment to keep their teeth or chew better or smile prettier the rest of their life. They have to know the benefits. They have to be able to see a way for them to be able to pay for this, because if they truly value that portion of their physical body and their physical well-being and how it is going to help improve their life, then they find a way to do it. So take that opportunity to provide more education to the patient. And if the patient doesn't provide you any kind of information when you're being silent, then, but they, if they come out and say, I just can't afford that. I just can't, that fee, it just seems like that it's really high. Then, then say, can you help me to understand why you feel that way? Because you don't at that point really understand why they feel that way. And I've always talked about saying the words, would you be so kind? Would you be so kind to help me to understand why you feel that way? And you're looking at them and you're saying it with compassion because you really mean it. You really want to know why they're objecting to what your fees are. And again, remember, I've said this already a couple times, that you've got to perform excellent clinical dentistry. The patient has to know that you did that. You have to have outstanding customer service. And you have to create a we care about you environment. And when that happens, patients rarely question the fees. At least they don't do it particularly right in front of you anyway. All right. So here are some fee takeaways that I want you to go away with this webinar tonight. And so as a rule of thumb, fees for lab-related procedures. So any kind of procedure that requires a lab cost should be 7 to 8 times your average lab fees. So I just want that to soak in, and I want you to just think about that. Because we have seen some dentists who usually they're perfectionists for sure, and they are paying a lot to a lab. And if they took that lab fee and multiplied that by 7 times, there is no way that their demographics would support the fee that that dentist would have to charge for it to be 7 to 8 times. So that's again, if it's okay with you, it's okay with me. But what's going to happen is that your laboratory costs are going to be way more than 10% of your deposits, because the lab fee is too high for what you can charge. So you have to really take a strong look at that. But again, like I said, if it's okay with you, then it's okay. Number 2, determine the amount of professional courtesy or free dentistry that you're giving. So I would enter a zero dollar amount, but it's zero, or an NC procedure when you are, posting to monitor services that you're giving away. So you can certainly put, if it's a professional courtesy, it's a dollar amount, you would enter that in. But if it's something that you're giving away for free, we've gone into offices where we've seen the dentist not charge for exams on periodic, recall appointments. We've also seen offices that haven't charged for x-rays also on recall appointments. And, you ask why they're not doing it, and it's like, well, because we've just never done it. There isn't really a reason. They just haven't ever done it. So I want you to monitor yourself. I want you to know this information. Because sometimes you think, you say, it's not very much. I mean, I don't think that we give too much away. Remember, you can't run a business on I think. I mean, let's see the actual facts. That's how you run a business, is by let me see the facts. I want you to have your fees analyzed, and I want you to elevate your fees to the primarily to the 85th percentile of your area. So there's fee surveys that can be done. We do that for our clients, and I want you to maintain that level unless you want to be the cheapest or you want to be the most expensive dentist in town, then don't do it. But you've knowledge is power. You've got to know where your fees are in relation to your demographic, so you're informed. I want you to make informed decisions. I don't want you to make emotional, decisions. Next, I want you to honor fees, certainly that you quoted during the treatment presentation, for up to a 3-month period. Now, I didn't say a year, that those were the fees that you quoted a year ago. All right, so I want you to do it for up to a 3-month period and explain in advance to the patient that your new fee schedule will be in force after that period elapses. So they need to, the patients need to be informed. There's nothing worse than, and I saw that happen. I was in an office, a patient was quoted a fee for a crown in December. The patient came in and had it done in January. Nobody, not from the assistant to the dentist to the front office, is paying one bit of attention to the patient's clinical notes or what was presented. They raised the fees in January. The gentleman was charged the new fee, and he was paying $5 a month. And it was like nobody questioned why he was paying $5 a month. Okay, so there's a financial coordinator that's not doing her job. But we caught it and contacted the patient, and he told us exactly why, is that he was quoted one price and was charged something else 30 days later. Number 5, if you recently invested in a continuing education program, then I don't want you to be afraid to raise your fees, commensurate with your newfound expertise, because your patients are going to benefit by that, new education, that new expertise that you have, and whatever procedure that it might be. So just don't be afraid to increase your fees, with any new education that you have. And number 6, if your practice overhead is 65%, a 5% fee increase across the board will yield an increase in profit of 14%. And if your overhead is 75%, where a lot of you are, a 5% fee increase will yield an increase in profit of 20%. And so it's those kind of things like that, that can really make, raising the fees obviously can make a big difference in a practice. But it has to be looked at individually, because some of you are in a place where you should not increase the fees, and then some of you are. So you just have to kind of know where you are, and you need to have a professional to be able to identify that as well. I would like to invite you to have a complimentary revenue and production assessment, which I do for practices, because as many as I've done over these years, we know that the typical practices average 25% more in production and revenues hiding in outdated systems. It's very easy for a consultant to go into a practice and increase a practice's production and revenues simply by raising the fees. But oftentimes that's not really what should happen. I mean, it's kind of it makes a consultant look, it's an easy fix, but there's usually other things that are why the practice is kind of plateauing and is not doing what it should be doing. So I'm happy to do this potential assessment. It shows you where you have potential in revenue opportunity, like in hygiene and perio and patient retention and your accounts receivable, and those aren't all the things, but that just shows you at a glance right here, for example, where that particular practice, in 12 months could have increased, could have had another $250,000 more. That's not uncommon for us to find that. I invite you to visit my website at McKenzieMGMT.com, and there you will find more information on the various type of consulting coaching programs that we offer. We also provide advanced training courses for treatment acceptance for office managers. Our front office training is the most popular one that we do. We also have CEO training for dentists. And then I also have management products on there, books and DVDs of seminars. Some of you would like to attend a seminar that I've given, and watching the DVD is the quickest way, because who knows when I might be in your area. I just can't be everywhere all the time, that's for sure. And I also have a practice management library on there that has all of my past articles. I have a weekly email newsletter that goes out every Thursday, and you can sign up for that right in this area here on the home page. And you also might want to sign up for my blog. I also have a weekly blog that we do, and I also have free complimentary podcasts. And then, of course, you've already taken advantage of my webinar this evening. And I invite you to contact me. So if you would like to have me to send you the link for that revenue and production potential assessment, just email me at info@McKenzieMGMT.com. It comes right to me, because that is hidden from public view. So I have to send you an invitation for you to go there. But I'm happy to do that for all you. Thank you so much. I hope that you got some great ideas and maybe opened your eyes a little bit more to assessing your fees and knowing exactly where they stand. You have a great evening, and I will see you and talk to you in about 2 months. Okay? Thanks. Bye-bye.